Welcome to Block and Wealth. This is the show where we take your most important sources, your notes, your research, and really distill them down.
That's right. We aim to get you those crucial insights you need to be truly well-informed, but, without all the overwhelm. Today, we're embarking on quite a journey, actually. We're trying to understand something incredibly subtle, but, well, profoundly impactful. It's the power of clear thinking, especially in those, ordinary day-to-day moments that really shape your future. We tend to focus on the grand stuff, right? The big life-altering decisions. But we often overlook these quiet, ongoing choices, the ones that compound over time. For this deep dive, we've pulled insights from, well, a pretty wide array of sources, everything from a fascinating dialogue on financial strategy to a really extensive exploration of clear thinking from a leading audiobook. Our mission, really, is to distill the most vital nuggets of wisdom, to give you a shortcut to understanding how your mind truly works, and ultimately how you can master your circumstances instead of, being mastered by them. Ready to jump in? Okay, let's unpack this then. There's this surprising truth, isn't there? Our future isn't solely defined by those huge momentous decisions, picking a life partner, choosing a career path. I mean, those are undeniably important, of course. But the real architects of our destiny, they seem to be the countless small, ordinary moments we navigate every single day. We often don't even realize we're making a choice in these fleeting instances, do we? We might think, oh, if I just get the big things right, everything else just sort of falls into place. But I mean, what happens if you take the most amazing person for granted? That relationship will inevitably falter, right? Or if you slack off in that perfect career, well, opportunities are just going to pass you by.
It's so true. And what's really powerful here is how these, well, seemingly insignificant moments, they just compound over time. Every single one subtly shifts your position. It either makes your future easier to navigate or, frankly, significantly harder, like letting your ego take control in a meeting. That doesn't just make that moment awkward. It creates these ripples, complicates future interactions. So if we're often unaware we're even making a choice in these small moments, how do we start to gain control? How do we actually improve our long-term position? Well, the sources make a pretty compelling case that clear thinking is fundamentally the key to proper positioning. It enables you to actively master your circumstances rather than just constantly reacting to them.
Okay, so if these small moments are that crucial, what's holding us back? Why aren't we making better choices in them? It turns out our own inner, well, primal parts, I guess you could call them, or biological instincts, they're often working against us, making life far more challenging than it maybe needs to be. And these aren't character flaws, by the way, that's important. Instead, think of them as your brain's default settings, or maybe factory settings, deeply ingrained behavioral programs written into our DNA by natural selection, really. They're designed to just execute automatically the moment they're triggered,
Yeah.
unless we consciously choose to pause and think.
Exactly. And the core problem really is that these defaults, they prevent us from taking that crucial pause to apply reason. They effectively hijack our biology. They push us to react in ways that, well, inevitably create downstream problems. So mastery of these ordinary moments isn't just possible. It's actually the critical ingredient for achieving your long-term goals. For sustained success, time and again, you just see it reacting without reasoning. It just makes every situation worse.
Let's talk about the first of these internal saboteurs then. The emotion default. This is where it gets incredibly relatable, I think, because it's our natural tendency, isn't it, to respond to feelings rather than, facts or logic. Think about Sonny Corleone in The Godfather. He's like the embodiment of this default. Vengeful, impulsive, hot-headed. He reacts first often with violence and only then considers the consequences, if at all. His unforced errors, like publicly beating his brother-in-law or undermining his father, they ensured he was always playing life on hard mode, as they say. And it tragically led to his brutal assassination.
Yeah, and the insidious part of this default is how it leads to mistakes that seem glaringly obvious in hindsight, just totally obvious, but they're completely invisible in the heat of the moment. Take the story of Olympian Matthew Emmons. He was moments away from a gold medal, rifle shooting, perfectly positioned, but he fired at the wrong target. His explanation, he said he was just worrying about calming myself down. So his focus was on the feeling, the anxiety, not the task itself. And it cost him everything. Or consider the truly heartbreaking story one source mentions about a colleague, Steve. He deeply regrets this emotionally charged political argument he had with his parents, that heated exchange. It turned out to be the last conversation he ever had with them before they tragically died in an accident. It leaves us with a critical question, doesn't it? Are you actively guarding against those biological vulnerabilities that leave you most exposed to this default? Things like, sleep deprivation, hunger, fatigue, distraction, high stress. Because those are the moments when emotion can just so easily hijack your best intentions.
Right. Wow. Okay, the second major default then, the ego default. This is that instinct, that subtle push to promote and protect our self-image, our position within any group hierarchy, almost at all costs. It often makes us more concerned with appearing successful than, genuinely being successful. Back to The Godfather, Carlo Rizzi's deep-seated pride and frustration with his low status. That illustrates this perfectly. He sought a role that aligned with how he saw himself, which, well, ultimately led him to betray the Corleone family.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. The ego has this uncanny way of transforming, like, unearned knowledge into reckless confidence. Someone might skim an article or two, right? And suddenly believe they're an expert. Like the person mentioned who confidently declared that solving the homeless population issue would be easy. Just like that. The ego also tricks us into feeling immune to bad luck. It blinds us to real risks. It can even make us sort of hoard information or resist empowering others. Why? Well, simply because having people depend on us for decisions makes us feel important. So the challenge for all of us then becomes, how do you genuinely recognize the signs? When is your ego in the driver's seat? Is it that constant need to prove you're right? A struggle to admit mistakes? Or maybe that quiet sting of envy when others succeed? These are the tells.
Okay, next up is the social default. This one, it sort of coaxes us towards conformity. It inspires us to fall in line with an idea or a behavior simply because, well, other people are doing it. Our deep-seated desire to fit in with the group, it's rooted in our evolutionary history, isn't it? Survival inside the tribe, while maybe hard, was far more likely than survival outside it. So we're kind of hardwired to look to others for cues on how to behave.
It's a powerful force, absolutely. And what's particularly insightful, I think, is how the social default encourages us to essentially outsource our thoughts, our beliefs, even our outcomes to others. When everyone around you is doing something, it's incredibly easy to rationalize doing it too, even if it feels a bit off. We fear being snubbed or ridiculed or appearing foolish. And that fear often far outweighs any potential upsides of deviating from the norm. This is precisely why best practices, by their very definition, are inherently average. They have to be. If you truly want to outperform, it demands independent thinking. And that often means doing something differently, which, yes, can mean risking looking like a fool, at least in the short term.
Right. Risking looking like a fool. Okay, our final saboteur, the inertia default. This one pushes us to maintain the status quo. We resist change, even when we know deep down it would probably be for the best. It's like Newton's first law of motion, but applied to human behavior, right? A mindset in a particular direction tends to continue in that direction. This is why we might stay in jobs we dislike or relationships that don't really make us happy anymore. There's this strange comfort in the familiar, isn't there? Even if it's not truly fulfilling.
And that comfort, well, it can be incredibly deceptive. It often leads us into what you might call the zone of average. That's the place where things are just working well enough, so you don't feel a strong enough push to make necessary changes. You sort of secretly hope they'll magically improve on their own, which they rarely do. This default also explains why we often double down when we're wrong, or avoid difficult conversations, which of course only makes them harder and more entrenched later. Historically, this default has caused significant delays in adopting incredibly beneficial changes, like the decades it took to ban lead fuel, despite clear evidence of its dangers. It's a default that operates largely undetected, kind of under the radar, until its negative effects become almost impossible to counter.
So, okay, if these defaults are hardwired into our biology, are we just doomed? Are we stuck on autopilot just reacting instead of choosing?
No, absolutely not. That's the good news.
Okay, good.
We could reprogram them. It's about taking these very same biological forces, the ones that might otherwise steer us wrong, and consciously turning them to our advantage, transforming those headwinds, into tailwinds that actively carry us toward our cherished goals.
I like that analogy, headwinds into tailwinds.
Yeah. Think of strengths here not as like brute force, but as the deliberate power to press pause on your defaults. To exercise good judgment, regardless of external circumstances, it's about domesticating these powerful wild horses of our nature, you could say, training them to consistently improve our lives, and establishing deliberate rituals, even really simple ones like taking a quick, measured pause before responding in a heated meeting. That's key to creating that positive inertia you mentioned earlier.
Okay, so let's talk about these strengths. The first one is self-accountability. This means taking full responsibility, right, for your abilities, your inabilities, and every single one of your actions. It's the exact opposite of running on autopilot. While you may never have asked for it, you are ultimately in charge of your own life, and you influence a far larger part of your outcomes than you might initially think. I remember a mentor once gave me some pretty blunt feedback. It was life-changing, though. I was making excuses for not finishing a project, and he just said, very simply, is your fault, stop making excuses. That simplicity just, it cut through everything. It really changed my perspective on taking ownership.
It's powerful, isn't it? That kind of directness. The challenge here is guarding against what psychologists call self-serving bias. That's where you readily attribute success to your own ability, but conveniently blame failure on external factors. It wasn't my fault. But no one truly cares about your excuses as much as you do. Focusing on what one source calls the wrong side of right, where you prioritize your ego, your need to be right over the actual outcome, that just prevents progress. True self-accountability means acknowledging that while you don't control everything that happens to you, you absolutely control how you respond to everything. That's where your power lies.
Okay, the second strength then, self-knowledge. This is about deeply knowing your own strengths and weaknesses, understanding what you genuinely can do, what you can't, and crucially, being honest about what you don't know. This seems to be the core to what many call playing games you can win. Mhm. I once saw a very successful friend made a fortune in real estate turn down what looked like an amazing investment opportunity. And his reason was simple. He just said, look, I don't know anything about that space. I like to stick to what I know. That's self-knowledge in action, right? Knowing your circle of competence and staying within it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what's truly insightful about self-knowledge is how it helps you pinpoint your blind spots, those inherent limitations on what you can know, or maybe the biases that make it incredibly hard to see your own flaws. As this physicist Richard Feynman famously put it, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. It's so true. The story of the USS Benfold, once one of the worst performing warships in the Navy, it illustrates this perfectly. Its commander transformed its performance by making a conscious effort to shift his perspective, to acknowledge his own blind spots. He actively sought to understand the ship from the crew's point of view. It was a radical shift, apparently, that led to profound improvement, just by seeing differently.
Wow. Okay. Next, we have self-control. This isn't just about gritty willpower, is it? It's more about consistently mastering your fears, your desires, your emotions. It's the ability to simply do whatever needs to be done, regardless of whether you feel like doing it at that specific moment. It's often not glamorous work, but the most successful people consistently demonstrate this quiet, disciplined consistency.
Exactly. And the real insight here, I think, is that emotional intensity. It's a fleeting mirage. It's disciplined consistency that truly builds long-term success. Think about it. Emotional highs and lows are far less important in the long run than that steady, unwavering effort, day in, day out. Self-control empowers you to keep those strong emotions in check. Without it, some adults are, as one of our sources rather bluntly puts it, only marginally better than a toddler at fending it off. It's a persistence, and it's having a reliable routine that truly keep you moving forward until you reach your goals.
Right. That disciplined consistency. Okay, the fourth strength, self-confidence. This means trusting in your own abilities, right?
Yeah.
And recognizing your value to others. You need this strength to think independently, to stand firm in the face of social pressure, ego, inertia, or even just intense emotion. It empowers resilience when you inevitably receive negative feedback, and it provides adaptability when circumstances change, which they always do.
And this raises a really important distinction. Are you distinguishing true self-confidence from mere overconfidence? Because overconfidence is often a significant weakness, not a strength. Genuinely confident people possess the strength to admit weaknesses and vulnerabilities, to acknowledge that others might be better at something, and crucially, to simply ask for help when they need it. It's the strength to face hard truths, to focus on what's right instead of who's right, even if it might bruise your self-image a little bit. There's an example of a woman who apparently secured a highly sought-after CEO job, not by outmaneuvering her rival, but by putting aside her ego and actively supporting his objectively better solution. That demonstrated her singular focus was on the company's best outcome, not her own advancement. That's confidence.
That's a great example. Now, a crucial step, but one that's often overlooked in building these strengths, is raising the standards you hold yourself to. Our surroundings, the people we interact with, even just colleagues at work, they unconsciously influence us, don't they? They often nudge us towards average standards. It's just easier that way. Yet, exceptional outcomes are almost always achieved by people with standards far higher than the average.
It's a powerful dynamic. Absolutely. And what's particularly impactful here is the realization that working with masters or exemplars, people who are positive outliers in their fields, is perhaps the single best education you can get. They don't just teach you skills, they show you through their very actions what your standards should be. It raises your bar. So consider this. Have you consciously assembled your personal board of directors? These are people you admire could be alive, historical figures, even fictional characters whose default behavior is precisely the behavior you aspire to. Learning from someone like, say, Charlie Munger, who famously claimed he never had an opinion on anything unless he knew the other side's argument better than they did, well, that dramatically raises the bar for how you form your own beliefs, doesn't it? You practice imitating them. You create a mental space to ask, okay, what would my exemplars do in this situation?
That's a really practical idea, the personal board of directors. But even after we've built up significant strength, we still have these inbuilt vulnerabilities, right? Cognitive blind spots, those things we don't even know we don't know. Sometimes we can't eliminate a weakness entirely, but we can absolutely manage it. And this is where safeguards come in.
Absolutely. Think of safeguards as powerful tools for protecting ourselves from ourselves, from those weaknesses that might just be impossible to overcome with strength alone, no matter how hard we try. They involve programming new proactive subroutines into your life, ways to mitigate or contain potentially harmful effects before they happen. For instance, if you're trying to eat healthier, purging your home of all junk food, that's a highly effective safeguard. Simple, but effective.
Okay, so what are some of these key safeguarding strategies then? How do we build these subroutines?
Well, one fundamental approach is prevention. Simple enough, right? It just means actively avoiding decision-making when you're in unfavorable conditions. Conditions where your defaults are most likely to take over. You might be familiar with the Alcoholics Anonymous ISHMADE acronym. It stands for hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. The wisdom there is straightforward. If you're feeling any of these, avoid making important decisions if you possibly can. Because your emotional default, your ego default, your social default, they're all primed and ready to take the wheel in those states.
That makes perfect sense. HALT. Okay, so recognizing those vulnerable states is step one. What's another effective safeguard?
Another really powerful strategy is creating automatic rules for success. You see, reactive choices are often just automatic responses to some stimulus. But you have the power to replace them with better, pre-programmed responses. Your own rules. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel laureate, he famously had a personal rule. Never say yes to a request on the phone. Why? So he could avoid overcommitting in the heat of the moment. Give himself time to think. I found similar success with my own rules, like no meetings before lunch to protect that deep work time. The beauty of personal rules is that people typically don't argue with them. They tend to respect them far more than individual case-by-case decisions you make on the fly.
I love that idea, making it an automatic rule rather than a constant battle of willpower every single time. Oh, what's another way we can set ourselves up for success?
A third effective safeguarding strategy is creating friction. This just means deliberately increasing the amount of effort it takes to do things that are contrary to your goals, making the bad choice harder. For instance, one source mentioned someone who told their colleagues, "Look, I'll buy you all lunch if you catch me with my email open before 11 a.m. That small, self-imposed friction, it made them focus intensely on a major report they were writing. It dramatically increased productivity. It works because it forces you to pause and consider the cost, however small, before defaulting to a less productive behavior. It interrupts the autopilot.
That's a brilliant, almost playful way to create accountability. And speaking of accountability, what about setting up more structured guidelines for ourselves?
Absolutely. A fourth strategy is putting in guardrails. This involves formulating operating procedures for yourself. Much like pilots and surgeons use checklists, we all know about those. These procedures are specifically designed to slow you down, to ensure critical steps aren't missed, especially under pressure. They force you to take that step back and ask, okay, what exactly am I trying to achieve here? And is this current action moving me closer to that goal or further away? It's a deliberate pause that helps bypass your impulsive defaults.
Okay, and finally, how can we leverage our perspective? How can changing how we see things act as a safeguard?
Right. The fifth powerful strategy is shifting your perspective. This means deliberately changing your frame of reference to see situations from different angles. This is incredibly effective at revealing your blind spots, those things you just weren't seeing. There's a story about a friend who apparently struggled deeply to relate to others. He just couldn't connect. He dramatically improved by adopting a simple safeguard. He would start important conversations by asking, "What did I miss?" And then crucially following up with, "Okay, what else did I miss?" This forced him to genuinely try to see things through others' eyes. It turned him into a far more effective communicator and leader, apparently. It's about consciously seeking out those different viewpoints.
Okay, fantastic. So now that we've fortified ourselves with strength, put these intelligent safeguards in place, how do we actually go about making conscious, clear decisions? Because it's not just about casually picking an option, is it? The sources outline this powerful four-stage process. First, defining the problem accurately, then exploring possible solutions, then evaluating those options, and finally, making the judgment and executing.
That's right. And what's often overlooked, I think, is that what seems like poor judgment in hindsight often doesn't even register as a conscious decision in the moment it happens. When our defaults conspire, we simply react without truly thinking, which typically causes more problems than it solves, right? It's also important to remember that while inaction can sometimes hurt more than speed for, say, inconsequential decisions, moving too quickly can significantly harm you for those highly consequential ones. Speed isn't always the answer.
Let's start with that crucial first stage then, defining the problem. The absolute first principle here seems to be taking responsibility for correctly identifying the real problem. We so often fall into the trap of solving the wrong problem entirely, don't we? Merely treating symptoms rather than unearthing the root cause. And this often happens because our social default, that desire to conform, pushes us to quickly agree on the first plausible definition that comes along. Get it over with.
It's a common pitfall, definitely. To combat this, a critical question you should always ask yourself is, what would have to be true for this problem not to exist in the first place? Go upstream. Consider the ASPCA example again. They were facing severe overcrowding in their shelters, a huge problem. They discovered that 30% of their dogs were owner surrenders, people giving up their pets. So instead of just focusing downstream trying to get more people to adopt, they looked upstream. They realized that by helping families afford basic pet needs, like food or rabies shots, they could prevent many of those surrenders entirely. That's a far more effective root cause solution, isn't it? To safeguard this initial stage, you can build what's called a problem-solution firewall. Basically hold entirely separate meetings, one just for defining the problem, another later for solving it. Don't mix them. And always apply the test of time. Ask yourself, will this solution fix the problem permanently, or is it just going to crop up again later?
Right, the problem solution firewall. I like that. Okay, so once you're absolutely clear on the real problem, the next stage is to explore possible solutions. This means opening your mind, imagining different possible futures. It requires confronting the brutal facts of your current reality. That's a concept Jim Collins brilliantly called the Stockdale paradox, right? Named after Admiral James Stockdale, who survived that brutal POW camp. He did it by accepting his harsh reality without ever losing faith in his ultimate victory. Facing facts, but keeping hope. We also need to ask, and then what? We need to apply second-level thinking to consider the outcomes of our outcomes, the ripple effects.
That's where creativity and, frankly, thoroughness come in. A common mental trap here is binary thinking, limiting yourself. Considering only two options, in either X or Y scenario, this is often a strong signal that you actually lack a full understanding of the situation. Instead, challenge yourself. Apply the 3+ principle. Force yourself to explore at least 3 distinct possible solutions, maybe more, and push for integrative thinking to find those clever, both-hand solutions, not just either. Like Isidore Sharp, who created the Four Seasons hotel chain. He masterfully combined the intimacy of a small hotel with the amenities of a large one, rather than just choosing between the traditional models. He found a third way. And finally, always consider opportunity costs, those often hidden trade-offs of choosing one option over another. Like Andrew Carnegie's bold decision to burn train cars after a wreck to avoid a far more costly system-wide shutdown. He saw the hidden cost of delay. These are crucial lenses for exploring solutions effectively.
Okay, so once you have your list of potential solutions, maybe 3 or more, you move to the third stage. Evaluate the options. This is where you pick the one most likely to make your future easier, right? To solve the root problem, this demands clear criteria. And those criteria need to be simple, directly promote your goal, and be decisive, easy to apply. When criteria become ambiguous or bogged down in jargon and complexity, they inevitably lead to endless debates and confusion. The tragic Challenger space shuttle disaster serves as such a stark reminder here. The criteria for launch inadvertently prioritized speed and, well, media spectacle over absolute safety. The criteria were flawed.
Exactly. And here's a critical insight for this stage. When evaluating, are you truly defining the one most important thing? The single priority. If you find yourself juggling 2 or more most important things, you're probably not thinking clearly enough. You need focus. This singular focus empowers your team, or even just yourself, to make decisions independently and consistently. I learned that from a wise mentor. Once you've settled on your clear criteria, it's about intelligent information gathering. This means actively targeting what you need to know before you start sifting through mountains of data. Know what you're looking for. Seek high-fidelity information, hi-fi they call it. Get it directly from the source, unfiltered if possible. Avoid those summaries that just give you the illusion of knowledge. And crucially, seek high expertise information, high X, especially from people who have recently solved a very similar problem. Learn from those who've done it. It's about being deliberate in what information you seek out and trust.
Targeting, hi-fi, high-X, got it. Finally, we reach the stage of making the judgment and executing, taking action, because there's simply no purpose in knowing what you should do and then not doing it. Fear often holds us back, doesn't it? Fear of consequences, fear of being wrong. When it comes to action, we can categorize decisions, apparently, by how consequential they are, how much they truly matter, and how reversible they are, how easily they can be undone if needed.
Exactly. And the sources offer some really powerful principles for taking action based on that. The A.S. Abbey principle, as soon as possible, suggests that if the cost to undo a decision is low, well, you should probably make it quickly. Get on with it. But if the cost to undo is high, the Ella principle, as late as possible, dictates you should delay the decision. Make it as late as possible to preserve your optionality, gather more info. This brings up a vital question, though. Do you truly know when to stop deliberating and actually start acting? When is enough analysis enough? The stop, flop, no principle offers a great practical guide here. You act when you stop gathering useful new information. That's the stop. Or when you start actively losing an opportunity by waiting longer. That's the flop. Or sometimes when you simply know deep down what the right thing to do is. That's the no, as in no more debate.
Stop, flop, no. I like that. And when the potential for failure is really expensive, when the stakes are high, it's always worth investing in a large margin of safety, isn't it? A substantial buffer between what you expect to happen and what realistically could happen if things go wrong. Think about the long-term capital management hedge fund, famously collapsed due in part to a complete lack of a margin of safety in their models, starkly contrasted with someone like Warren Buffett's approach using diversification as protection against ignorance, building in that buffer.
Precisely. Building on that, there are powerful safeguards, specifically for the execution phase itself. Consider shooting bullets, calibrating, then shooting cannonballs. What does that mean? It means running small, low-risk experiments. First, the bullets. Learn from them, adjust, calibrate. Then, only then, commit your full resources, shoot the cannonball. Another great one is to live with the decision before announcing it. Write down your thoughts, your rationale. Sit with it for a bit. Check in with your own emotions and gut feeling before you tell others and lock yourself in. And finally, the fail-safe principle. This includes things like setting tripwires, pre-committed actions you'll take if certain negative conditions arise, like climbers do on Mount Everest, or using Ulysses packs, deliberately tying your own hands in advance to ensure you stick to your chosen path, even when temptation arises later, like Ulysses tying himself to the mast. In leadership, there's also the concept of commander's intent, where you empower your teams by clearly setting the overall goal and parameters, but without micromanaging every single step, trusting them to execute. All these are about programming success into the execution phase.
This brings us really to the ultimate goal, doesn't it? Which is about wanting what matters, gaining wisdom. Because good judgment isn't just about knowing how to get what you want, it's crucially about understanding what's truly worth wanting in the first place. There's a profound difference, the sources say, between effective decisions, which just bring immediate results, maybe short-term gains, and good decisions. Good decisions are the ones that align with your long-term goals and values, the ones that lead to true, lasting satisfaction.
It's such a vital distinction. Because many of us, regrettably, get caught on what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill. You know, that temporary euphoria you feel when you acquire something new, a new car, a promotion, whatever. It quickly fades, right? And it gets replaced by comparison, looking at what others have, and an endless desire for more. As the saying goes, comparison is the thief of joy. It really is. True wisdom goes far beyond this. It involves recognizing that a life lived according to someone else's scoreboard, someone else's definition of success, is simply not a life worth living. Not for you, anyway.
So, if that's the case, how do we actually gain this wisdom? How do we truly determine what matters in the grand scheme of things for ourselves?
It's a profound question, isn't it? And what's incredibly insightful here is the perspective offered by happiness experts, I guess you could call them, like the gerontologist Carl Pillemer, who spent years studying the wisdom of older people, people looking back on their lives. He found that the single most common lesson, the most frequent piece of advice from those in their 70s, 80s, and beyond was strikingly simple. Life is short. This leads us to a really powerful thought experiment. You can ask yourself, what would you do if today were truly the last day of your life? Steve Jobs apparently used this as a daily ritual, and Jeff Bezos famously uses what he calls a regret minimization framework. He projects himself forward to age 80 and asks, what will I regret not having done? He often realized he would regret not trying something far more than he'd ever regret trying and failing.
That thought experiment is incredibly powerful because it allows you to essentially turn your future hindsight into your current foresight, doesn't it? It helps you see the gap, sometimes a painful gap, between who you are right now and who you genuinely want to be. You start to realize that those ordinary, everyday moments, how you treat people, what you spend your time on, actually matter far more than the fleeting excitement of the big prizes, the external validation. And you also understand that the quiet, nagging pain of failing to try something you felt called to do, that often never really goes away. Unlike the pain of trying and failing, which can be intense, sure, but is usually quicker to heal.
That's the essence of true wisdom, I believe. Recognizing that what seems to matter immensely in the moment, the urgent email, the petty argument, rarely matters much in the grand sweep of life. Yet what truly matters in life, your health, your relationships, your integrity, always matters in the moment, even if it doesn't feel urgent. Wise people understand what real wealth consists of. And it's not just power or fame or money. It's the harmony of life's various parts. Your work, yes, but also your health, your family, your friends, maybe your faith, your community. Contribution, that profound balance, that integration is what ultimately makes life meaningful. So good judgment, above all else, is about being effective at achieving what truly matters, not just today, but in life as a whole.
Wow. That's a lot to mull over, isn't it? But the core idea here seems profoundly simple in a way. Our invisible instincts, these deeply ingrained defaults we've been talking about, they're constantly shaping our lives, often leading us to react unconsciously and get results we don't genuinely want, living a life by accident almost.
Exactly. And it means that improving your judgment isn't about simply accumulating more tools for rationality, more frameworks, more techniques, though those can help. It's more fundamentally about consciously aligning yourself with how the world truly works, about designing systems for yourself, cultivating habits, things that gently pull your subconscious in the right direction automatically. It's about designing systems when you're at your best, when you're calm and clear-headed, that will actually work for you, even when you're at your worst, tired, stressed, emotional.
Designing systems for your future self. I like that. Well, we truly hope this deep dive helps you recognize those crucial, ordinary moments where clear thinking is really called for, allowing you to maybe just pause, apply reason, and move ever closer to the life you truly want to live.
And remember, good judgment. It's an investment. It takes effort. But poor judgment, that will cost you a fortune in more ways than one.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep thinking clearly and keep diving deep.